Today we're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 17. Last week we went over one of my favorite portions of Scripture, which was the Mount of Transfiguration. We looked at the similarities between when Moses in Exodus 24 went up Mount Horeb and he had met with Yahweh and Yahweh had given the Ten Commandments. We looked at a lot of the similarities between some of the nuances of what happened on the Mount of Transfiguration, where you have James, John, and Peter who went up. They immediately see Moses, Elijah. Jesus has this transformation in front of them. And Peter did what any person would do. You know, there's multiple people around, and he goes, hey, let me build shelters for all of you. And heaven interrupts him while he's speaking, and heaven says, no, this is my son, listen to him. We talked about, as commandment-loving people, a lot of times we spend a lot of emphasis on the 613, which is really, it's an argument. It's more of a Jewish number that comes up. There's an argument on how many actual commandments are in the Torah. 613 is the most popular, but a lot of those can be boiled down to even more simplistic when you take out if you're a man versus a woman, the temple sacrifices, all that type of stuff. So there's not 613 commandments that are given to every single person to adhere to, but there is one really, really important commandment that comes in the gospel that I testified in the 20 years of being in ministries who love the commandments. I never heard anybody teach this commandment as being up there. We hear, when we talk about the gospel, we hear about the two commandments. We hear about love God, love your neighbor. And then we hear about how all the Torah and the prophets will hang off of those two. And there's been some fun charts and stuff like that. You look at the 10 Commandments, 5 or 6 of them teach you how to love God. The other ones teach you how to love your neighbor. And then you can slowly but surely go down the list of, kind of building out the commandment tree. But what about that commandment in Matthew chapter 17 on the Mount of Transfiguration, when heaven speaks audibly and he says, this is my son, listen to him. It's one of those commandments that, again, we will always struggle with because, I do a really good job of listening to my wife. Really good job. She's not here this week, so she can't attest or deflect or deny. I do a really, really good job of listening to my wife. My kids, sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, but we're all sons and daughters of God if we believe Jesus is our Messiah. And so let's just hypothetically take the parental standpoint. Kids always listen to their parents. Always. Always. I put Corey in the back room because Michael was leading worship this week, and I didn't want to have to look at his facial expressions next to his father. I didn't want him to lie. Now, he might be muting me on the broadcast right now, which is his power to do so. But my kids don't always listen to their father, and if we're being honest, we don't always listen to him too. But when we get into the argument over how do we listen to Moses, how do we listen to Elijah, how do we listen to Jeremiah and Ezekiel and all of the prophets and all of the writings that are in there, what do we do about David when he talks in the Psalms, and what do we do about the Proverbs, and what do we do? God forbid we try to unravel, Ecclesiastes and what some people believe is Solomon's writings, and what do we do with that? How do we fix that? Well, maybe we start with some of the most simplistic commandments, like listen to Jesus, because that's what heaven interrupted Peter and said, listen to him. That's the stage for this week. That's the stage. Jesus had gone up the mountain. They had separated from the crowds. They had separated from the women and the rest of the disciples. There was 3 of the disciples up that mountain. And here this week, we're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 17 with them coming down the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, a large crowd was waiting for them, and a man came and knelt before them, and Jesus said, Lord, have mercy, before Jesus, and he had said, Lord, have mercy on my son. He has seizures and suffers terribly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they couldn't heal him. So Jesus is coming down from the mountain. He's coming down from what I would say is a pretty monumental moment in all of the history of Israel and the entire Bible, where Peter is saying, hey, let's set up houses for Moses, Elijah, and Yeshua. And heaven's interrupting him and saying, hold on, wait a second. You're going to listen to Jesus. You're going to listen to Yeshua. And then Moses and Elijah cease to be there. All of a sudden, they come down off that mountain, off that intimate time of revelation where heaven and earth meet, and immediately they go back into the work of the ministry. I want to also point out that when it talks about the disciples there, we have to remember what the context is, because sometimes we read the word disciples and we think of the 12. That's not necessarily wrong, but you have to remember, if this gentleman brought his son to the disciples while Jesus was up on the mountain, it's possible that he brought him to the disciples that weren't Peter, James, and John, because they were on the mountain. So it's possible that it was actually 9 of the disciples that were there and not the other 3. It's not necessarily explicit in Matthew's gospel, but remember, the other 3 were up on the mountain. If this is immediate at this time, it's 9 of the disciples who were present for when the father brought a son who was having seizures to them to be healed. As we look at this week, we look at the similarities of the mountain of Exodus 24, Mount Horeb, the giving of the Torah, but yet there's also a stark difference. Remember, when Moses went up the mountain, because the Mount of Horeb, where the 10 Commandments, Mount Sinai, where the 10 Commandments were given, and the Mount of Transfiguration have a lot in common, right? 6 days. There's all kinds of things. The cloud comes, the revelation of the sun. There's all kinds of things that are similar. Yet there's a very stark difference that's happening here. What happened when Moses came down the mountain the first time? Anybody remember that little debacle? You know, we like to use it for everything. Like every time we don't like something, we're like, it's a golden calf. You know, we kind of act like, this is some blanket thing. They thought when Moses was up on the mountain, they thought that Moses had abandoned them. And so they said, hey, let us make an image of the gods who led us out of Egypt, because Moses is gone. He was gone for about 40 days. And he's like, he's gone. So let us make this to be our God to worship. And so when Moses comes down, he's like, oh my gosh, guys, really? And he's so enraged by what he sees happening with the people of Israel, he smashes the tablets. They had forgotten while he was on the mountain. Here, there's a stark difference. Jesus comes down the mountain, and they're waiting for him. They hadn't moved on. They weren't in rebellion. They're still attempting to do the ministry of what they saw. They saw Jesus heal, cast out demons, do all these things. They come down the mountain, and he's like, hey, look, your disciples don't have the power to do this. Can you help me? That's the stark difference. So what we see going up the mountain, there's a lot of similarities. And once they're on the mountain, there's some similarities. There's definitely some explicit differences on the mountain. And when they come back down from that moment on, there's a shift that's happening. It's not just what was happening in the past now is also happening in the future. There is a shift. It's kind of like when McFly went back in time and he messed stuff up in Back to the Future. When he comes back and he's like, okay, everything is okay. It's like, wait a second, like, this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right. So what we have is we have a moving forward from the Mount Transfiguration. We don't just have history repeating itself. We have some nuances that are different. One, the people hadn't moved on. They're still waiting with great anticipation. It's not even like they're waiting for Jesus to come down the mountain so they can sit down again and let him talk. They're like, hey, look, demon-possessed boy, something's happening here, not cool, need your help. They're immediately asking him to go back, not into teaching, but into mission ministry mode. A lot of people will say like, hey, Chris, the last 6 months of the church, we haven't been able to do table fellowship, kids classes, all these extracurricular activities that we used to be able to do because we're in full renovation mode over there and here. What exactly does your week look like? So how many hours do you spend preparing a message? I'll have to tell you, preparing the message, a lot of times it's the least of my concerns, because the true ministry isn't just studying the Bible and writing some sort of sermon that I think you're going to like. Most ministry is what we see happen right here. Now, I got to be truly honest with you. I'm not a demon hunter. I don't believe everything is a demon. Anybody who's been in this church for a long period of time, just because something pops up or something's happening, I'm not like, oh, there's a demon, there's a demon, there's a demon. I do believe in demons. I do believe in the spiritual realm. I believe that the spiritual realm is at work all around us. I also believe, is one of the things Pastor Brent likes to say all the time, that the Word of God is the Word of God. And so when darkness increases, if there's demonology, if there's attacks, if there's spirituality, things that are happening, then you have to trust that Yahweh says His Spirit will increase as well. So a lot of times when we're like, oh man, there's so much oppression, there's so much demon stuff happening around me, and there's a lot of denominations that like to lean into that, I'm normally like, okay, well, if there is demons that are happening, then that means Jesus is happening equal or more, and so I can chill. So no, I'm not running around doing the power of Christ compels you, that type of stuff. I tried to do that over some of the food at camp this week because I was like, ooh, that'll make you fast. But the reality is most of what's happening in ministry is similar to this, where people have problems. People have problems. That's what ministry is. It's people who have problems. It's easy for us to sit and to judge the people who are on the street corners, the people who come into our shops or our places of business, and we can immediately say, oh man, they haven't showered in a couple of days, or oh man, maybe they're financially hurt or whatever. But everybody in this room has some issue, including myself, at all points in time. Why? Because we're human. And so we have highs and we have lows and we have good days and we have bad days. We have days where we throw the remote on the front pew. That just happened this morning. We have days where all these things happen. That's ministry. And we get to study the Bible together. That's super cool. Why? Because in the end, that's the only way that you're actually going to overcome this, is to know what the Word of God says. Otherwise, you'll be easily manipulated. Because if it sounds good, if it makes you feel good, it's got to be from God. No. Most of ministry is this types of stuff. It's not just studying the Bible. It's not just putting together a sermon. Verse 17, Jesus said, you faithless and corrupt people. Ooh. You faithless and corrupt people, how long must I be with you? And how long must I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Then Jesus rebuked the demon in the boy, and it left him. From the moment the boy was well, and afterwards the disciples asked Jesus privately, why couldn't we cast out the demon? You don't have enough faith, Jesus told them. I tell you the truth, if you had faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say this to the mountain, move from here to there, and it would move, and nothing would be impossible. Before we get to the mustard seed, let's talk about the fact that Jesus chastises them verbally. This isn't Jesus chastising the Pharisees or the Sadducees for abusing the positions they had been in, or using his word to manipulate or enslave people. He's talking to his disciples. He's talking to the people that are around there. These are people who followed him, who believe in him. And probably others, but we know for sure they're there because they're mentioned in there. You faithless and corrupt people, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Think of that for a second. Jesus Christ leaves his throne in heaven. We know, because we've talked about this extensively, that the book of Revelation says the throne room of heaven is constantly extolling him. Holy, 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 kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. Worthy is the Lamb. They're constantly singing the praises of Jesus over and over and over and over again in the throne room. And all of a sudden he comes and he takes on flesh and he's ministering to people, and the people who's closest to, he deems as lacking in faith. That's on top of the people who were entrusted with the Pharisee and Sadducee offices to teach the Torah, who not only have manipulated, but they've now taken issue with him in front of other people. Here's the Mashiach, the one that all the Torah and the prophets testify to, who's now walking, who's doing miraculous things repeatedly. We're not talking about one instance he's completing the Torah and the prophets, not just one. It's like almost literally like every day. He's saying, I am Mashiach, I am Mashiach. And they don't trust, they don't believe, they test him, they doubt him, they persecute him, they entrap him. A little bit of the humanity of Jesus is coming out there. There's a frustration that's happening in this moment. But even with that frustration, Jesus is not going to lose sight of the mission. If Jesus were to let every frustration that came in front of him help him to lose sight of the mission, we all would be in trouble. Because as he is headed towards the cross, as he's headed towards Jerusalem, as he's headed towards what he's prophesying that's happening, the weight of all the world and all the sins of all time, past, present, and future, are upon him. He's taking that upon himself. So this is just a little bit of the humanity, but in the humanity, he never loses sight of the mission. He says, bring the boy to me. And he rebukes the demon. Something interesting. When Jesus is dealing with demons and demonic, it's actually pretty simplistic. Everything we've read from Matthew chapter 4, now through the middle of Matthew chapter 17, if a demon manifests, Jesus just rebukes it and casts it out, tells it to leave. Pretty simple, right? What is a different thing that's happening, though, with the disciples and the crowds and all of those? He says something, and they doubt. He says something, they second guess. He says something, so wait a second. Casting out a demon is more simplistic than discipling people in Jesus? Everybody's staring at me like, casting out of whoa, I'm sorry. I've watched an awful lot of YouTube shorts, man. Like, one of my Honda, and they're like taking off the jackets and they're throwing them down, and it's like the 105 ways to cast out a demon. Seems like when Jesus is casting out a demon or telling a demonic presence to leave, it's pretty simplistic, pretty easy. It's kind of like, check, please. Okay, they want to leave. Yeah, bye-bye. Bye, Felicia. Gone. But when it comes to discipling, when it comes to teaching the Torah and the prophets and the mission of the kingdom, that seems to be a little bit harder. There's second guessing and there's doubting and there's all these things. And these are people who, once again, watched him cast out demons. So when we look at Christianity as a whole now, when we look at, let's just not even talk about Christianity, let's talk about the world in general. So we'll lump everybody. Judaism, Buddhists, Hindus, atheists. Well, when somebody starts thinking about UFOs, demons, all kinds of weird principalities, things get pretty creepy and weird right away, right? Like, immediately people are like, ooh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. But when Jesus is casting out demonic spirits, it's pretty simple in the Gospels. When he's trying to disciple and ask people to follow him and be loyal and faithful to him, that's harder, and he has more struggles with that than he does in casting out spiritual principalities. I know it's uncomfortable. I get it. I want us to think about that. Because a lot of people are like, well, the goal is to overcome the devil. That actually seems like to be pretty simple here when Jesus is talking. I rebuke you, leave. To become disciples of Christ seems to be hard. And it's something that caused Jesus to be very frustrated with them. To be a disciple of Jesus means you believe in the power of Jesus, you believe in the teachings of Jesus, you believe in the kingdom of Jesus, and you have genuine faith in all of those things. The Israelites had lacked faith that even though they had seen the visual signs, think of this for a second. They had to have, when they were on the ground, they had to have seen something happening. Sinai, they talk about the fact that they could see the cloud cover, they could see the lightning, they could see this. So on this encounter up the mountain, they probably saw something. They maybe didn't necessarily know exactly what all that was, but they saw something just as the layman on the ground. Something was going on that mountain. They could see that. And here the disciples that lacked genuine faith, that they could do exactly what they had seen Jesus do. Just like the Israelites had lacked faith that Moses was going to come down after meeting with Yahweh in Exodus 24, the disciples had lacked genuine faith that they were going to be able to manifest the kingdom of God on this earth. Even though Jesus had already sent them out on a test mission, even though they had already traveled with Jesus. This also comes after 2 weeks ago, we had talked about Jesus saying at Caesarea Philippi that Peter now had the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Jesus has already given them power, already given them influence, already given them, and yet here we see that they had lacked the faith to be able to cast out a demon while Jesus was on the mountain. Peter was also on the mountain with Jesus. Jesus had come to teach, empower, and invite disciples into the power of kingdom of heaven because Jesus was starting to change the narrative. The narrative now is that I'm going to have to go to Jerusalem, I'm going to be persecuted, and I'm going to end up dying. But have faith, I'm going to rise again on the third day. Which means that at some point in time, he's leaving us. He's leaving his students. You have to be ready. You have to be ready. A lot of people say like, oh, hey, I really like this church. What happens when the pastor passes away? What happens when the pastor steps down? What happens when, a lot of times they struggle, right? They go through a big interview process to find people, churches split and people go off. I don't really like that pastor or whatever it is. And communities of faith, they kind of go through struggles. Some of them will make it out and people will like the new pastor more than they like the old pastor. But there's a high degree of turnover in communities. And we're not even talking about our witness to the people outside the church. We're just talking about our own family group. All of these things are in the mind of Jesus as he's teaching his disciples. It's going to change when I leave. It's going to be a struggle for them when I leave. Kids who are graduating, getting ready to go to college, or those who are already in college. Was it not hard when the environment changed, when you had to go out on your own? There's some positives for that. Your mom and your dad don't have to nag you anymore. You get to do whatever you want. But guess what? It also comes with the responsibility and the accountability that if you do something stupid, you're going to have to pay for it. Yeah, your mom and dad can come bail you out of jail, but you still went to jail. Or you still ran up your credit card debt or whatever it was. I went super dark, super heavy, like my mom never had to bail me out of jail. Just saying. There's responsibility that comes with the freedom. And this is what Jesus is trying to get his disciples to understand is I'm giving you the power of the keys of the kingdom of heaven. And there's a huge responsibility that's going to come with that. The mustard seed analogy seems pretty unique to us. We're like, oh, well, it's just a super tiny seed. And I've been a part of a lot of mustard seed teachings where a teacher comes out and they just hold this tiny little mustard seed. And it really would have worked for me, maybe for trolling, because we're big guys. You just got a tiny little seed in our hand. But the mustard seed was not unique to the Hebrews or the Israelites. It was not unique at all. The mustard seed was actually used as a common idiom in the first century Jewish culture. It was an idiom for the smallest microscopic type of measurement. So does it work from the standpoint of like just looking at a tiny little mustard seed? Of course it works. But in the first century Jewish culture, like anybody, we're renovating right now. Michael, I'll call Michael and we'll talk about electric stuff and make sure I don't do anything. I've never ever talked to Michael about cubics. Well, it's a form of measurement in the Torah. Michael, I'm going to need 14 cubics of EMT so that we can run this. And then when you're done, I'm going to need another 3 cubics. No. Let alone, and that's a biblical form of measurement that's all throughout the Torah. When we talk about the tabernacle, we talk about the temple, those types of things. That's all over the place. Michael, I'm going to need 17,431 mustard seeds worth of EMT. Has anybody ever done that? No. But that was what the culture was. It meant it was the smallest form of measurement, a microscopic form of measurement. Yet despite the fact that it is one of the smallest seeds out there, it's one of the fastest growing seeds. You look at a seed that's so small, and when it's done, it turns into this big, hardy bush. Anybody ever seen a mustard seed bush? Anybody ever seen one? Yeah, yes, you lived in Israel. They're all over Israel. Mustard seed bushes grow into a big, hardy bush that's about 10 feet tall. To put that into perspective, that's about that tall, roughly. That's 3 cubics. I'm just joking. I don't know what that is in cubics. That's roughly how tall that is. So you think of a seed that's so, you can barely see it in your hand, grows into a pretty big, ginormous bush. Also, it's interesting to notice that even though it is such a small seed, it grows fast and it takes over. Brent has done countless tours to the land of Israel. Some of you in this room have gone to Israel, whether with him or with other people. There's all kinds of mountainsides that are completely covered with mustard seed bushes over there. You know, it'd be unique to us because we're like, oh, well, mustard seed's like, oh, okay, I understand. So we look outside and we're like, oh, maybe it's like that, bush over there. We try to put it into our framework. But to the people he's talking to in this analogy at this time, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So a 10-foot tall tree grows from something that looks literally microscopic at the beginning. This analogy is that the smallest amount of genuine faith that God can actually do, that God actually will do, that reliance on God's power can quickly grow into a stable and hardy faith. When we look at what a mustard seed and a mustard plant looks like, we have to look at the entire process. The smallest little bit of genuine faith, the smallest amount, can grow very quickly. It can catch on very quickly. It can grow to a very tall and large and sturdy bush very quickly. This is the analogy that Jesus is using. So let's talk about this for a second because we come from a unique position in Christianity. There's churches that have different features and different kind of bents and gifts in that. Some of them are really, really good at evangelistic work. It's very heavy in the outreach. And so there's a lot of turnover for people who come through the door because they're constantly bringing in people who have never darkened the doors of a church. You have churches that are very good at discipleship. So a lot of times they don't bring a lot of people in, but they'll do really, really well at training up and building the people that are in their church. You have churches that are really good at worship. And so when you think of that church, you think of music, and you think of singing, and you think of dancing, and you think of performance arts and all those things. I was at a church in Houston one time leading worship, and they were doing like all these like mime dances and stuff like that. And I was like, super cool. I can't do any of that. Like, I can't even do the white guy dances with a robot. Like, I don't even look good doing that. So so everybody has a gift and a talent that they have and an expression in a church. But when we look at the mustard seed analogy, the disciples are learned in Jesus. They're not new to Jesus. The disciples are getting an interaction with somebody who knows of Jesus' power enough so that they have faith to come and bring their child, but they're not a disciple of Jesus in any way, shape, or form. So when we look at how do we apply that as a church body and as Christians today, kind of wrecks a lot of our theology, right? Well, in order to go to church, I need to get my life right. In order to be a part of a church, I probably need 10%. I don't really know what the number is, but let's just use the tithe number. At 10%, I have to be holier 10% than what I am right now. Well, wait a second. If we use the mustard seed analogy, then the slightest little bit of faith that Jesus Christ can heal you, can set you free, can help get rid of your addictions or your evilness or whatever your thing is, because we all have them. The slightest faith leads you to the doors of a church. Guess what? You're probably still doing your drugs or doing whatever it is that you're doing. We get a little uncomfortable about that, like when we're like, oh man, you mean tell me like some dude who's like on coke might come to church? How is that any different than somebody who's watching something they're not supposed to on the internet? But a little bit of faith for them to come through that door, if we have genuine faith that God has healed us, set us free, and changed our hearts and caused us to be a new creation, even though we're not perfect, we're just on the road, then they should see that, it should grow, and it should what? Permeate a hillside. Let's just talk about that tiny little hillside over there that's got a bunch of dead grass. In theory, that's what it should do. Our little bit of genuine faith should catch fire, and those who have just the tiniest bit of faith to even darken the doors, I love the thought of not being trapped anymore. Maybe not even understanding Jesus or the Holy Spirit or the Torah or anything. Should do what? It should cause us to lock arms with them, and then when the mustard seed blooms into a what? Beautiful bush, and then it fills the hillside. In Israel, the entire hillside is covered with them, and especially in the Galilee region. This is a visible analogy of what's happening here, because we'll see in the next couple of verses that after they had gathered in Galilee, that's where 22 starts. So they are coming down the mount and they're making their way back towards Galilee. The Galilee region is completely permeated with mustard seed plants. So not only is Jesus speaking to them in the moment about something that has a spiritual implication, he's using a spiritual implication that's going to have a very real physical and visual application to them based upon the text. A lot of times we forget about it. It's like, well, the mustard seed's a really cool concept. Like Jesus was using something that as soon as he was done talking to them and they started to go on their next mission, they were going to see exactly what it was he was just talking. So he's confirming this to them with what's happening around them. It's a visual analogy of this moment. In the spring, the blooms of the mustard seed plant will aggressively cover fields, roadsides, and hills. This is physical. Daniel's shaking her head, yes, I must have done something right on my prep. I didn't even have to call in a phone a friend for Brent on this one. I know he's been there multiple times. He's seen it. Think of that for a second. Okay, now let's take the physical out where everything, there's a mustard seed, everywhere I see a mustard seed. Now put it in the spiritual practice. When you guys drive out of this property today, and you go to wherever you're going. I'm going to Pink. I'll take back the iPads and Michael's music stand and all the things. I'm going to Pink. There's a lot of bushes on the way to Pink. A lot of bushes. Some hogs too, but a lot of bushes. Nothing like what you would see if every bush that was there was a crepe myrtle, a red crepe myrtle, all of them blooming at the same time. Nothing like a grove of cedar trees as far as you can see. No, there's a mixture of plants that are in there. There's a mixture of things that you'll see. Not a blanket covering of the same plant. So spiritually, what will I see? Well, more than once when I drive out of the church, I'll see at least somebody who's homeless on my way towards my house. Not even to Pink, on my way to my house. Sometimes they're down at the corner. Sometimes they're right outside down there. Sometimes they're standing on the corner. Sometimes they're asking for money. Sometimes they're just walking down the road, talking to themselves. I'll pass a whole lot of people who aren't homeless, just going to guess some of them believe in Jesus Christ. Don't really know that. I'm making a guess. And some of them don't believe in Jesus Christ. Using the mustard seed analogy, what would it be like if every one of those people was blaring Christian music, was professing Jesus, was wearing a shirt with the cross on it, was permeating every other person? This is the analogy we're looking at here. The mustard seed would take over the hillside. We know just by thinking of our own travel to and from this church, that's not what we're going to see out there. We're not going to see an overwhelming amount of Jesus freaks. Some of you may take Brent to Ted's afterwards for food, or the lazy donkey, if you really love him. I prefer to be an intellectual donkey, but, it is what it is. Do you think the people that you're going to see in that restaurant are going to be overwhelmingly talking about Jesus Christ, or the Torah, or the prophets, or the writings? No. Nowadays, you'll be lucky if you see a couple of people even bow their head. So wait. Is the opportunity in front of us very similar to the opportunity that was in front of the disciples in this text? That we would have even the smallest little level of genuine faith that Jesus in the kingdom of heaven have done what they said they were going to do so that we could engage as ambassadors of the kingdom of heaven here on earth, right? Some of the kids in here, I was in the back because I was still wrestling through my own things. We had nothing but tech issues this morning, overwhelming tech issues. And I got to be honest with you, I was a little frustrated this morning. Okay, that's not me being honest with you. I was way past a little frustrated. I was full on ticked. Nothing seemed to go right. I had to get myself right back there. I happened to see a couple of youth worshiping fully, just arms wide open, fully engaged in worship, loving God with everything they have. But it's also some of the same people that I've seen multiple times before that aren't. So the faith that you are encouraged by, that grew in you for a week, being away from social media, away from television, away from the influences of the world, they caused you to come back with a renewed sense of worship and desire and passion. So what do we do as adults when we don't go to a youth camp? What do we do as adults when we don't have that shot in the arm of Jesus power, Holy Spirit power? What do? Do we just keep barely making it through? That's not the mustard seed analogy. We're just barely making it through. The smallest little bit of genuine faith that Jesus is going to do what he said he's going to do and what he's already done nowadays should catch like wildfire. And it should cause us to have a renewed passion for what Jesus not only has done for us, but for all the people out there that they don't even know Jesus has done something and Jesus is going to do something. Sometimes we just struggle to be able to come through the doors of the church. And I'm not preaching at you. I'm somewhat testifying to myself. I'm tired. I got to go back out to pink. The kingdom of heaven sometimes causes us to choose to do hard things. To step when we don't want to step. Why? Because I don't want to be called faithless. I don't want to be called corrupt. I don't want Jesus to say, hey, Chris, how long do I have to be at HFF, dude? Really? How long do I have to be with you at HFF, Chris? Before you'll love me and you'll dive in with me and you'll have passion for me. And you'll take that outside the doors and into the community. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want God to say, Chris, you faithless, corrupt person. And the physical always bears witness to the spiritual. Just that smallest amount of genuine faith of the power of the kingdom of heaven could cover all of southwest Oklahoma City. Your faith is to actually be visible. See, that's one of the things that people forget about the mustard seed. It was a visible faith. Otherwise, Jesus would have waited till they weren't in the Galilean region. He would have waited to some other time. He used an analogy that not only was 100% a part of their culture, but was something that they were immediately going to turn around and see. It's a visible faith. So, got to confess my sins. I had visible frustration today, not visible faith earlier in the day. Enough so that Mark came to me and is like, you okay, brother? And in my mind, I'm like, no, I'm not okay. I had to download an app and honestly, full transparency, I'm like, I can't ever give Brent any grief about technology again because I can't download an app. I can't get the TV to work. I can't do this. My pride is hurt. And he's like, I know. I saw you throw the remote. Yeah, I did. I had visible frustration. How many of us walk around with visible frustration? Thank you for being honest. Visible frustration. The Bible tells us that we're supposed to walk around with the faith of the mustard seed, so what? That people would see visible faith. A lot of times we're walking around with visible frustration. Visible frustration doesn't go away on its own. It takes faith for the frustration. Faith that God's going to get us through this season. Faith that God's going to get us over this. Faith that God's going to figure out why Walmart decided to buy Vizio and all of a sudden I need a new login on a television that works just fine and Cam's not here for me to delegate. Sometimes visible frustration is part of the attire we wear on a regular basis, not visible faith. I want to encourage you guys. I want to encourage you because a lot of you in this room, your children just came back or they're coming back tomorrow from camp. And I'm sure there was frustrations out there. You know, they play games and kids lose and kids like to win. And that's like, they didn't get on the team they wanted. Like everything in life has the opportunity to have a frustration. But they're coming from a dedicated time where they eat, they sleep, and they talk about Jesus nonstop. If they're in the Gaga ball pit, they're talking about Jesus. If after worship, some of the greatest times out there is after worship. They go through worship and worship just starts going and they go through the teaching and then all of a sudden after worship they have this like glow. Is that what they called it? Like after worship flow or glow or something like that? Where it's basically just a spontaneous time of any of the kids who want to play a guitar or whatever and they start worshiping and they basically take over worship for however long they want. Now I know this is unique. Because a lot of times those same kids don't want to be on the worship team here. They don't want to be on the tech team. They don't want to learn things. They don't want to be a part of that because they see it as work. And honestly, probably some of that is because of my visible frustration. I'm probably part of the reason. I'm probably part of the problem, honestly. What would happen in each one of your homes if that worship flow, that's what it's called, right? Worship flow? If that worship flow came back and became an actual part of your routine. What would happen? What would happen, parents? Because the parents in this room, you love Jesus, you're obviously here. What would happen if rather than you pushing down from your crisp, visible frustration, you allowed them to actually lead the home into worship flow? What if those habits of your household shifted? And we started to become more like children and less like Us. Where rather than constantly feeling like we had to carry the weight of the world with our finances and our health and all these things, we had faith that we could let them go. I'm not talking about you like quitting your job and being like, oh, well, God's just like, that's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about the things that we constantly walk around with visible frustration with that could be replaced with visible faith. I'll tell you this, as a guy who's worked on this property, there's a lot of houses over there in those apartments, and there's a lot of people who walk their dogs, and they walk to and from work, and some people ride their bikes. I'm not the only one who struggles with visible frustration, because I see them on a regular basis. But the question is if I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, if I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ, am I modeling to them that it's okay to share in the visible frustration, or am I modeling to them visible faith? And actually testifying to them of who I serve. Or when they see me walk from building to building or walk outside or whatever it is, mowing the grass, whatever it is, are they seeing that I'm a confirmation of their visual frustration? What about when you walk out of your house or in the grocery store, getting gas, wherever it is? Are you showing visible faith, like the mustard seed analogy shows us, or visible frustration? Because what you feed grows. If you don't put down fertilizer on your grass, you're going to get weeds. And if the frustration is the weeds that choke out the faith, you might want to put a little fertilizer on the faith. This is the invitation of Christ. It's not about how awesome you are. It's not about how observant you are or how holy you are. It's that if you have a small amount of genuine faith in Jesus Christ, it can produce and will produce large, tangible outcomes. And with this analogy, the story shifts in verse 22. After they gathered again in Galilee, Jesus told them, the Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of the enemies. He will be killed, but on the third day he will be raised from the dead. And the disciples were filled with grief. Once again, Jesus brings back the situation at hand with what the mission is. He is preparing his disciples multiple times for what's going to happen. If you're truly a disciple of Christ, you will end up dying. Now, good news, you were born in the United States of America. There's a lot of religious freedoms for you here, unlike China or Iran. So the death you're going to have is going to be a physical death. No. It's going to be a spiritual death. You're going to put to death the evil inclination, the evil nature, the fleshly nature. But most likely, you are not going to be killed because you go to church. We live in a country that if we ever went to war with some other country, most of the people are going to be Christians. We're going to be out there with their Chevy S10s and their Dodge Rams and their shotguns and four-wheel drives because a country Christian boy will survive. That was the original version. The world made them change the lyrics. We're blessed people, guys. The people who are in this time, they were persecuted all the time. They were enslaved throughout the prophets. They were enslaved constantly. All the way from the Torah through the prophets to the time of Jesus, the Israelites are constantly enslaved. They're constantly being taken captive over and over and over and over again. I mean, as far as I know, again, my wife's not here to correct me. As far as I know, I've not been taken captive. As far as I know, I'm still going to get in my Tesla and it's going to drive me to pink. I'm pretty spoiled. As far as I know, we're a blessed people. As far as I know, if I get there quick, I might get in the pool today. I've got friends who've got pools. I got neighbors who've got pools. I get to choose which pool I'm going to go to. I feel like a blessed person. I can leave a youth church camp, go to the pool, and still talk about Jesus. That might persecute some of my neighbors, but it ain't persecution on me. We're a blessed people. Jesus is telling that he's going to be killed, and on the third day he will rise from the dead so that his disciples understand and deal with the grief now. We have become so desensitized to what was happening at the time of the prophets and the Hebrews and the Israelites that we don't even grieve over our own sins, let alone the fact that Jesus had to die for them. We become so desensitized as a nation because we are so blessed. But this would have meant something to these men and women who would have heard it. It would have meant something to them. Jesus is constantly reminding his disciples of the net 30. They're on borrowed time with Jesus. They don't understand it. He's trying to tell them they're on borrowed time. This payment plan is coming due. And he's trying to warn them. Hey, at the first of next month, you're going to have to write that check. Have urgency. Don't wait till the day. Have urgency. You can't force someone else to have genuine faith. How things have shifted into the 21st century. Social media has allowed us, and engagements on the internet have allowed us to care so much more about other people's genuine faith. How many days does the Bible tell us that somebody who has been a lifelong sinner, how many days should they be abstinent of their sin before they step foot in a church? Anybody know the number? Brent, don't you tell them the number. Anybody know the number? The Bible tells us. Zero. Just like Jesus is trying to prepare them for the reality of what discipleship costs, we need to understand what the reality of the calling is for the disciples of Christ. Not only is it for us to have enough faith that the kingdom of God will help us eradicate the things in our life, it's to have enough faith that Jesus is going to do the same thing in the lives of other people. And we need to start worrying more about our own genuine faith and a lot less about the genuine faith of other people. It's super popular nowadays because we've gone through the cycles. I believe it was with the start of the O.J. Simpson trial to where news is 24/7. You can get every opinion on everything under the sun. Everybody's being watched. Everything is TMZ. Everybody gets to hear the dirt and the gossip on people's life so that we get to sit in the seat of judgment on who those people are or what's happening. The Bible and what Jesus is telling his disciples here is that you need to take captive and responsibility for your genuine faith. Stop worrying about what everybody else is doing. If Brent, if you and I we talk about God a lot together. We're constantly talking about God together. If we could just fix ourselves, because we're not that far off, if we could just fix ourselves, then we could be so much worried about everybody else's genuine faith. The truth is that we're not even close to having full genuine faith because we struggle with the same things you guys do because we're human just like you. So that means that we should probably not spend our entire time worrying about what everybody else is doing. We should fix ourselves. Because until I can honestly look you in the eyes and say I don't practice any type of visual frustration, let alone actually visible faith. We're just talking about I'm just abstaining from frustration. I just smile all the time. Until we can get to that point, we probably shouldn't be worried about anybody else's genuine faith. Why? Because if each one of us started to take responsibility for our own genuine faith, the Bible has a promise. We just read it. The smallest amount of genuine faith will grow quickly, it will spread quickly, and it should, through spreading in community, allow us to grow and to be a tall, pretty, hardy bush, right? When we think about that, let's not think of that as us like I'm going to be some sort of like Sasquatch-looking man. I would be if I put my hair down. Let's talk about this from the standpoint of a faith standpoint. Isn't that what you want? I want to trust Jesus more. I want to worry less. I want to honor God more through my actions. That's what I want to do. And all of those things are what? You're growing into a more sturdy bush, right? Because a lot of us are pear trees. One of the most demonic trees in the face of the earth. I know because Jacob and I cut down a 30-foot one this past week. It was a very interesting analogy for me to see. Last year, my tree started to grow towards my pergola, and it was rubbing my pergola. I got pretty annoyed. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to train my tree to grow up, not out. So I went and I got one of my ratchet straps, and I went and I pulled it back to the trunk so it would grow up and not out. Just doing a great job. That tree got big quick. Looked like a beautiful, healthy tree. Lots of shade over the pergola. I could sit out there even when it was 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon and it was hot and it's humid. Oklahoma's got some Tennessee humidity this year. It's a very unique year for us. And it took one storm with 122 to 126 mile an hour winds to snap that bad boy in half. And the only reason why that entire half of the tree didn't go through my pergola and potentially even through my roof, I couldn't see until the next day. I saw that it was like somewhat, and I was like, oh, okay, it's just a tree branch or whatever. No. When we went out the next day, we walk around the back of the house, and that whole half of that tree is being held to the trunk with that ratchet strap. The only reason why that tree didn't go through my pergola and my roof is because of that ratchet strap. Where I thought I was training my tree so that I didn't have to listen to the really annoying rub on my roof, God foresaw that there would be a storm coming well over a year later, and I had damage, but a lot less damage than if that tree had come down through my pergola or through my roof. Now, I can sit here and I can say, good job, Chris, you're smart. Look at what you did for yourself. You saved yourself. Or I can say, I had no idea because I didn't have any idea. I was angry because it was rubbing. It was making a high-pitched noise like nails on a chalkboard. Not peaceful. No bueno. The smallest amount of faith you have, genuine faith, will take over the hillside. Otherwise, what ends up happening is we have Christians who grew up to be a 30-year-old Christian that's a 30-foot pear tree. And one storm comes, and they immediately snap in half. And they might be fortunate enough that maybe their spouse or their best friend or somebody in their church is close enough that they're the ratchet strap that's holding them somewhat close. I mean, it's broken off. It's definitely going to fall. But at least I got you right now. I got you, man. I got you. But that's not how modern Christianity, that's not where it's going right now. Where it's going right now is that people don't have authentic faith. They don't have authentic relationships. Everything is surface level. Everything is a kiddie pool level. And when somebody has the wind come through, even though they look like they're a tall, strong believer in Jesus, they immediately split in half and they end up doing what? Sitting on my driveway waiting for the city of Norman, which will be till Jesus comes back to do something right. And that is to get it out. Brent at HFF.church. Our church doesn't exist in Norman anymore. I'm safe to take shots at my mayor. This is the analogy Jesus is giving us. You can't force someone else to have genuine faith. All you can do is you can focus yourself on the growth of your genuine faith. You can't work your way into genuine faith. If I'm more obedient, I'll have more faith. How'd that work out for the Pharisees and Sadducees? If I do it better, I'll have more faith. No, it's a trust issue. And America has really bad trust issues right now. We don't trust our spouses. We don't trust our friends. We don't trust the church. We don't trust Republicans. We don't trust Democrats. We don't trust anybody. You can't work your way into a genuine faith. It is something that has to be revealed to you. I also find it ironic that this testimony of what's happening is the very thing that happens after the revelation of who Jesus Christ is to Peter, John, and James. Nothing in the Bible is done out of coincidence. So the moment he goes up on the mountain and he reveals himself and he comes back down the mountain, he immediately has to give this analogy. The revelation of Jesus Christ and who he is should lead us to adopt a renewed mind. Worship team, you can come back. Tanya, I can't promise I won't preach for 30 more minutes, but I love you. I'm going to have to get her one of those massage guns for her. At some point in time, you have to understand that a renewed mind can only be given by the revelation of Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit. It's not something that you can gain by just having the most intellectual knowledge of Jesus. Life promises that we will die. It's a core human truth. You ain't getting out of this world alive. Not going to happen. The question is, before your body succumbs to your physical death, will you have already passed from death to life with your soul and your spirit? There's a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of effort that's put into trying to preserve your physical. And here before Jesus can set the physical realm back into line, he tells them you got to deal with your spiritual. The faith, small as a mustard seed, that Jesus is who he says he is, that he's going to do what he's going to do. It will grow and it will spread like wildfire. Not the faith in me, not the faith in Brent, not the faith in Michael or Philip or Daniel or anybody else. Faith in Jesus. I got a lot of people who call me, it's like, man, I messed up, I did something bad, or hey, man, I need your help, I didn't do something right. I really appreciate that you have enough faith in me to think that I can help you through this situation. But the question is do you actually believe Jesus will help you through this situation? I don't mind walking alongside you. But that's an awful lot of faith that somehow I have some sort of golden ticket, some golden chocolate bar or something. Where's Jesus fit in that equation? And see, a lot of times people will leave the church because they put their faith in a spiritual leader. They'll put their faith in a pastor or an elder or whatever. And they'll put a faith in them that they're going to take care of me. This is their responsibility. And yet every one of them will let somebody down at some point in time. You won't be able to answer the phone quick enough. You won't be able to give the right counsel, whatever it is. In the end, Jesus will never fail you. What you fail to slay today in your life will become your master tomorrow. And what you slay today will show who really is your master. There's a lot of religions that talk about just getting at peace. Let's just get at peace. Honestly, that's really what the Israelites were hoping at this time, is that this political Mashiach would come back and he would establish peace with the rule of Israel. Jesus is absolutely going to establish peace. But it's going to take war in order to do that. If you will, stand with me. Let's respond.